So this has
Hi.
been kind of a fun day. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk. Well, let's talk about anything you want to talk about. Let's talk AI in general. We were just really having a conversation that said storytelling is not dead and AI is not going to replace it. Agree, disagree, discuss.
Well, I was drawn to a comment Philippe made about some companies would insulate themselves entirely from large language models, like if they were going to make images that would contain bias that would get them into trouble. And we all know that the LOL clauses in enterprise contracts tend to reflect the fact that brands get fairly grumpy if something happens that upsets the brand. And so I think that it's really interesting to think of large language models as like a raw material. And I was a manufacturing engineer way back in my career, and I think once you spent a bit of time in manufacturing, you never really kind of stop being a bit like that. And when I think of large language models, to me, it's like this incredibly powerful raw material. So like carbon fiber is a really powerful raw material. We can all agree it's very exciting, but we're not all running out and buying reels of it.
No.
And if we want to make glass out of sand, we need industrial tooling to do that. And so I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had. And you mentioned in your newsletter that I read every morning, you mentioned this morning about custom bespoke builds on large language models. And I'm particularly interested in architecture that enables brands to realize tangible value from this raw material, which may include insulating them from the risks of that material.
So let's go over it one by one. Just not for nothing. When you start thinking about industrial tooling, and it's something we really don't talk enough about, if you want to somehow impact a commercial grade large language model and customize it in any way for your own use, at the moment, because GPT stands for pre-trained, you're going to have to fine tune, or you're going to have to find a external vector database that you're going to use to embed in a pre-prompt, or you're going to have to transfer learn. You're going to have to do something like that. And there's almost no tooling available commercially to do any of that. There are disparate components. It's the Wild West. I mean, unless you know differently, I have not seen any company come to the marketplace yet and say, hey, plug in here, put your stuff here, put their stuff there, slam them together. Yay, it works. It requires professional annotation, classification of your data. You're going to have to spend some quality time writing evals and evaluations, evals, and then you're going to have to make sure someone checks those evals so that someone graded the homework. You can't just do the homework. Someone's going to have to grade the homework. And by the time you're done with all that, then you're still at the mercy of the foundational model that's going to get retrained after you just spent all this time and energy. There is, to my knowledge, there isn't a way to do that in a 3, 2, 1, go. So from an industrial tooling perspective, this is hard now.
Yeah.
This is really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it is hard. I think maybe the 3, 2, 1, go is something like, so I think about it in terms of like access, scale, and trust. So I see all these models. I mean, there's an ad I walked past in the city yesterday. It was like the new Anthropic ad for Claude. And it's like, there's a Claude for everyone, electrician, doctor, lawyer. And I thought, well, is there one for a head of digital, right? I'm not sure. Like, so when we think about access, so which model do we access? So the CEO says, Shelly, you're my head of digital. Go automate with AI. You know, what do? Do you go out and buy yourself a load of Anthropic or Mistral or ChatGPT? So, and then what are we going to use these things for? So access, how do we access the world and what do we access it for? And then the second thing would be scale, because I run an enterprise and I've got a lot of throughput going through my business and that can't be disrupted. Yeah, sure, I want to see some uplift to what I'm already doing, but the whole point of industrial revolutions in history and automation has been to open up new doors for scale and production and output and cost efficiency in a whole new way. And then the third one, like you say, is trust. And so like at Phrasee, we're in the brand language business, and we've built architecture over the last 10 years that has large language models woven throughout the architecture, but we also have a version of that for companies that have large language model bans. There are a few in the city that have large language model bans. Like we have like a peanut-free kitchen version for companies that have that. And we have a team of linguists who sit between brand language, regional language, and the algorithm. Because like if we wanted to get together like US English, 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 Australian English, and we can all debate what a sentence means, you know, we would all have a different opinion on that.
Sure.
This is really complicated. So I think whether it's teams, whether it's architecture, infrastructure, whatever, I think it's worthwhile brands thinking about this as a raw material. But that is how all technologies have evolved, how they've been harnessed. And so I think we're going to start seeing the emergence of specialists, whereas right now I think there are quite a few generalists all layered on top of each
I
other.
think all the large language models are just that. They're general knowledge, and a lot of it, and not all of it's well thought through. It's funny, just yesterday I brought up a topic I have not thought about in more than a decade. I was in a meeting with some colleagues, and I was reminded of the last paragraph in my first book, Television Disrupted, the transition from network to networked TV. And the paragraph is the closing paragraph of the book, and it talks about the vice president of electricity, who was the highest paid, most technological human being employed from about 1880 to about 1920. And this person was in charge of one thing. They were in charge of keeping the generators at the factories running, because electricity was generated at a factory, and every factory in the Industrial Revolution required electricity as they became electrified. And the only way to do that was to generate your own, and the only way to do that was to have a highly paid, highly skilled technologist, dubbed the vice president of electricity, running your generators. And by 1920, this human being, and it was always a guy, this guy's job had been reduced from an actual job, which was really high paying, to a single line item on a P&L that said electricity, as everybody went to the public grid for electricity. I kind of feel like cloud compute took us from racking and stacking, you know, all that data center stuff in the on premises, and we had our IT guys all born from that. We evolved to cloud, which is the equivalent of whatever your Microsoft Azure or AWS bill looks like, or GCP bill looks like. But I don't see a path at the moment to the customized model where my vice president of AI, or my chief AI officer, my CIO, I don't see that person being reduced to a line item called AGI, ASI, AI cloud model, because every one of those needs to be custom trained to literally know your company. Inside, has to. Otherwise, it has no value to you. It's just everyone else has the same model you do. So the path to customization, that level of tooling seems to be the short-term goal. And my question to you is, how do you get it right? I know how to do it right now, today, this minute, at 10 after 3. I know how to do it right now, right here, with any commercially available cloud compute that's anything, whether it's Claude or Pi or any of the GPT models from OpenAI, the Llama models from Meta. Yeah, we know how to do that. But I don't know how it's going to be done in a week and a half from now.
Yeah, and the pressure's on, isn't it? I mean, there was a brilliant Microsoft, it was a blog or a newsletter I read last week, and it talked about how employees are bringing their AIs to work, but it said that the pressure for short-term ROI on business leaders is so great. I think the expression was, they are inert in the face of AI inevitability. You know, like the ROI now. And that's certainly, when I go out to different businesses, I can see that. They may have hired a few PhDs and some AI specialists and thrown a bunch of money at their private instance, but they're struggling to get the value from that raw material. And so I think it's good just to break it down into the use case. Like, what is the problem? And because we're a gathering of marketers, and you showed that example earlier on of ChatGPT like creating emails. Like one of the One of the other things that's been happening to marketers and culture and society over the last few years, of course, is the shift into mobile.
Sure.
And we've seen this increase in the number of channels people use. I think Forrester said that the average American uses 5.4 channels now. And so if I think about it, I think like mobile push, mobile in-apps, mobile content cards, web push, web in-apps, web content cards, SMS, email. That's 8. And those are kind of a basic 8, plus WhatsApp, messengers, Roku, Xbox, Apple Vision Pro. So, and then of course we're getting Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, and these people, Gen Zs, have got money now. So if we just sort of bring it back down to kind of brass tacks, what is the challenge here? Well, there are so many marketers that perhaps don't realize that they have a supply-demand imbalance of messaging. So if you are a marketer and you just, as I've spoken to many brand marketers who have, the monthly email broadcast campaign, maybe a couple of SMS campaigns. So what can I do with AI on that? Well, I'm not sure AI is going to suddenly make the conversion of those emails 40% better. Not unless they offer free Taylor Swift tickets with every pizza, right? And that's probably not great for the brand. So AI, but one thing AI is really good at, and this is what we've seen with our data science at Phrasee, is because the technology is producing so much quality brand compliant material, we can see that there is a statistical inevitability that the AI will outperform the humans. So a bit like a casino. You might win a hand of blackjack, but you know the casino is going to win if you keep playing. Well, in this case, the AI casino is going to keep winning if you keep playing. So if you've got lots of campaigns and lots of messaging going through, if you can, through the architecture, brand style, tone, voice, and like I said with us, the computational linguists, if we can say the quality of the messaging is good, we know the performance is going to be good over time. So then the next thing is, how do we serve the customer? And we know that the customer are not necessarily on email and SMS, which is what I'm sending my monthly campaigns on. If I send my kids an email, they don't pick it up, let alone if it comes from a brand, So if the challenge is we need to do life cycle marketing, if the challenge is that we need to understand our customers, nurture them as a friend, not just message them every time we want them to buy something, then I think this raw material is really valuable for that, because now we can start to use it to produce quality messaging that is going to perform well over time. And if we can solve for the quality problem, if we can get humans out of the loop, and we can learn to trust it, then it becomes like robots on a factory floor welding cars together. Eventually, it's kind of lights out, let's go.
So we've seen point solutions for email marketing that are various levels. The demo I showed was a very simple pre-prompt and a very simple declaration of a framework. And I think what we've learned over the couple of years we've been doing this, and we don't do it that way. That was done in GPT-4, I think, just as the consumer product. And look, marketing frameworks are well understood. Everybody knows what 4Cs is, or PASTER, or ADA. These are frameworks we've all been writing in for years and years and years. What the things I think are interesting from a point solution perspective are that you could take, for example, 3 or 4 of your best email marketing campaigns, like the ones that just work great. And I keep thinking that truck is going to back up directly into me, but I know we're not on the ground floor. But I'm completely sure I'm about to be run over by a truck that's backing up. So it's much louder here.
Actually coming up in a cherry pick.
Yeah, I know.
Look through the window in a minute.
Much louder here than it is where you are. Trust me. I'm like, should we move? Anyway. So anyway, what happens is, what we found fascinating is you can actually ask the model to analyze text and tell you what framework it thinks it is. If it can't identify the framework, we did something funny that just seemed to work. What would you call this if you needed to give it a name? Like, how would you name this framework? And I kept thinking, because of the probabilistic nature of the large language models, and because the consumer version of it has only their temperature setting, you don't get to change the temperature of for those of you who don't work with large language models a lot, you can change the temperature from 0 to 1. Actually, each model has a different scale. And it's most probabilistic, meaning that at one temperature setting, it will always do the same output. And it'll do the most probabilistic, which will mean it'll have the most creativity or hallucinations thrown in, to the lowest setting where it's going to be deterministic and it's just going to give you the same output every single time, which you've never seen. Like if you ask ChatGPT or you ask Llama to do something, it's going to do it differently every single time, even if you give it the same exact instructions. But if you turn the temperature down to deterministic temperature, it will give you the same output every single time. And if you take it all the way up to probabilistic, that temperature is going to give you like nonsense every time, completely different stuff every time. So what I found fascinating is if you upload your 5 best email campaigns or 3 best email campaigns, and what is this? And it gives you a name for it. When you ask for it to write in that name, it almost always does. So that's kind of cool. So now you've got like existing frameworks that it knows from having scraped the whole internet, and it's got this framework you just invented for your own brand. Now you say, go, write me a thing, in this framework, and it's going to do it. If you have given it enough variables to constrain its language, it's about as brand safe as you can be. And when you do it through the API as opposed to doing it through the consumer grade product, which you have to tool up for. You literally have to build the tools for. But if you're willing to spend the money to build the tools, this one little point system will actually do that job better than any other system we've ever seen do that. Yeah. It's one of the few use cases where you kind of go, wow, if I had to bang out like a ton of performance marketing, I actually feel like I could trust that system. You still got to look at it, but it's doing this at a speed and at a, and if you could tie it into the CRM system and you have a propensity field in the database, and it's like, oh, I know that Daniel will respond to ADA or 4Cs or features, advantages, benefits. I know you respond to that. I'm going to constantly send you writings in that framework. It's going to have a better chance of getting a conversion. But when you go one step above that point solution, when you go, this works great, let me take this to the next level, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, and I was going to extend that to obviously different demographics. So take your example there, but let's say we've got a boomer who's into golf and I've got a young Gen Z who's into golf. Maybe we don't talk about golf to you the same way, but maybe we're Adidas. And so, and let's say, the other thing, of course, going on is PII. So, all these brands have been collecting all this PII, working very, very hard to become GDPR compliant, earning the right to gather your data, and with all of the best intentions and work in the world, all of us in this room still get emails that say hello first name on them, don't we? Or personalization that uses our PII in a weird way. We think, like not even my mum talks to me that way. Like if anyone says like, dear Daniel, I'm like already like, no. So there's another opportunity there. If we can get AI to understand with the brands, like what is the proposition? What are we selling? Product category data. And who are we selling it to? PII. We can get the AI to produce massive volumes of highly personalized, nuanced language that are going to be appropriate to your product preference and to your demographic.
Show of hands. Hyper-personalization. Cool or creepy? Cool? Creepy? Both?
We should talk about an example. Okay, let me ask an example.
I just wanted to know, cool or creepy, that's all.
So let's say we're also talking about the fact we don't just want to talk to people, we want to sell them something, right? But let's just talk about some personalization. So Paolo, I know Paolo. So Paolo's just put a golf club or a golf shirt in his car, and then he abandons his car because he actually has to spend some time working at OPMG, Omnicom. So day later, you get that email, which you know you're going to get. Dear Paolo, you left golf shirt in your cart. That's pretty low grade personalization. But what if it said, it's going to be sunny in your zip code this weekend. Great weekend to hit the greens, something like that. So it's got some context to the product that you put in the cart. It's thinking about information that we can get about the weather in your location. And maybe it's using full stops and no emojis because it knows your demographic versus it's going to be more TikTok speak if you're a bit more kind of Gen Alpha, that kind of thing. Like, so I just wonder how we all feel about that. Like, that is personalization, but it's not necessarily using PII. It's more contextual. And I think we're all trying to figure out like
So
what personalization
the beautiful
means.
thing about that question is that it is a testable hypothesis, right? And in the marketing world that I have grown up in, testable hypotheses are everywhere. Your willingness to test and fail, that is cultural to your organization. But the idea that you could test that, and now the question becomes at what price? In the world of generative AI, that's low or no cost, near or in real time. Now we're talking about doing thousands of tests at a level that only Facebook could do before or Google could do before. Now you as an SMB or even as a big brand, you can turn around and say, you know what? I'm gonna just test this till it works and pretty much get away with it because you don't need, if you have a culture where, and this is important, so now the copywriter is gonna have to not see it. Whoever's approving it for tone, does it check every box on the brand attributes box? Was it properly written? No, it's constrained to a bunch of variables that are predetermined. And if you trust the AI to do that, and if the AI demonstrates that it can because you've put appropriate constraints in place, then yeah, it's a testable hypothesis. If you let this thing just go, like if you use the consumer version of ChatGPT to do that, as opposed to building a little tooling, get the API, get the interface going, set up the constraints, fine tune the model, I guess the joke has always been, in the old days I would code for 2 days and I would QA for 1 day, and now I'm basically, it's the other thing, I'm coding for 1 day and I'm QAing for 2 days. Yeah. Right? You're gonna just have to QA the hell out of this. And it's a cultural change. Yeah. It's a giant cultural shift. In any marketing department, you're gonna have to wake up in the morning and go, you know what, things we used to do, the workflow and process must be innovated. And I think that's pretty much the lesson for the practical use of these tools today. You have to be willing to change the way you do it, which requires a resource commitment, a time commitment, and a mindset commitment. Like, it's 3 things. You got to want to do it, and it's got to be like really politically willful, because the pushback is crazy. I use this term all the time, the middle management mafia. I think many of you know who they are. They're also lovingly known as the deep state. They're the nice people who quiet quit. They're the nice people who sabotage everything that looks like change. They live by the old adage that the only people that like change are babies in wet diapers. This is the issue. So if you have the political will to make this happen, you make this change happen. But it's not press a button, get it done, which is why I started today by saying, and no one in this room, nobody in this room is losing their job to AI. But somebody with the political will to figure out how to send out 100,000 personalized emails that are completely different until they relentlessly get the KPIs that they want, and they accomplish their goals at a level that you could never even begin to get to because you have 57 steps on a Gantt chart that have to be done every time you iterate. It's a different world, right? So the question is, when you leave here, you have to make a decision. Do you have the political will, or can you somehow get the political capital to make this change? Because it not only does it take political capital, it takes capital in human resources and finances. So I don't know if that's your experience, but it's certainly mine.
It is, and it goes back to a comment I think we said in the Nielsen conversation, which was, so we've already talked about one of the benefits. Yes, we'd like to get campaigns converting higher. Yes, we'd like to get the benefits of scale because this is a new wave of automation. But it goes back to the other point, which is we have to start thinking about getting time back to do the thinking. I think that was the expression, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what Dave said. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I wonder if a brand has 6, 10 copywriters, if we can just amplify their output, serve the personalized needs of lifecycle marketing, but maybe liberate one of those people to start going on working on above the line campaigns, which maybe AI is not great at because of the originality, and of course it's required. Then that's just such a multi-dimensional win for the business, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that is a drop the mic moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Head from Phrasee. Let's give him a big hand of applause.
Thanks.